I think to start off, maybe we should look at external development from the beginning, and also how in the past years it's been growing in the company. We've been having more and more companies are using external partners. So, so what is external development in your vision, and why is it important? Why does it grow so much?
I can speak a little bit about that. Basically, when you look at the evolution of games and the complexity of games, there's, especially in the AAA space, there's no way you can have all the development in-house ready on time and budget. So that means that we as developers and publishers need to find the best partners to help us create that content. Not only from an art perspective, but in other disciplines like engineering or operations and whatnot. So I would say the overarching trend is games are getting more complex, content is getting more sophisticated and more than films sometimes, so that requires partnerships and collaboration with a lot of companies that are specialized on different things.
Do we just go one by one? If you want, if you have input. Well, I would just say that, just tagging onto that in terms of complexity. So I've just joined Microsoft the past year and a half, and seeing just how huge it is in terms of, I call it Microsoft land, because there's so many people from Microsoft that work within Redmond, and there's many different businesses. So games is a very almost growing part, but still a small part of the overall business for Microsoft. And when I was in Edmonton, back at BioWare, it's a very different area in terms of the number of people that you can get to work within Edmonton, right? So one major part of why I got into external development was because we were finite in terms of the number of people that were in the studio. And there was so much talent all over the world that specialized in the things that we needed. So now I'm on Forza. It's a different lens in terms of the type of skill sets that we need in people, but still we don't have all the skill sets in-house, so we have to look everywhere and anywhere and everywhere. So this is my first time in Brazil. I'm hoping to discover some new partners here.
I'm not sure how much I can add, because you guys pretty much covered everything in terms of why we look for those external development teams and the complexity of making games. I'm in the industry for 20 years now. Worked with studios where everything was developed internally, and now every studio I know and I talk to, they rely on external developers to develop content. It's not about cost. A lot of people think it's about cost. It's mainly about having resources available. Having, especially in the UK right now, is a bit tricky. So we rely on external developers to fill that gap, to be part of our team or an extension of our team. There's no more days where we used to send a couple of briefs and they used to external developers to do the assets and send it back to us. So for us, it's very key for our expansion and our growth.
On my side, I work in mobile games, so our turnaround time for making a game is very, very short. We can make a game in about 6 months. So for us, external development is highly needed because we have limited people on our team and a short amount of time. So to make the best game possible, we rely on external dev to provide those additional assets that we literally just don't have time for.
I think piggybacking off what everybody said here, the complexity, scalability, the ability to ramp up, but also the ability to ramp back down. Like she said, she's making games in a quick cadence, and it offers a sense of security for the individual studio that you can eliminate that overhead at the end of the project, so it helps keep your studio solvent, financially. Because when that contract's over, you can ramp down and you could ramp back up whenever you need to.
Okay, so we've seen how important it is to have good partners, so that everyone can get something out of it in terms of helping out with complexity or helping out with time frames, ramp up or ramp down. But on the other hand, looking specifically at the region and what you've seen big from companies in Brazil and Latin America, how important do you feel external development is for the region and how it can help the industry locally? What can external development do for Brazil or Latin America? You guys want to continue?
Go that way, or we change the flow?
Cassie?
One of the things I first noticed about the companies and vendors here is that you guys are very, very passionate about what you do, and that shows. And we think highly of that. So, and also like Brazil in particular, huge gamers, huge. Like we make sure all of our games are translated in Portuguese, just because we know you guys play tons and tons of games. So you guys have the knowledge, the expertise, and the passion. So I think external dev can do really well here because you guys know how games work and also very talented. You guys have a unique art style that I don't normally see outside of South America. So yeah, I'm looking forward to working with companies here.
I can just clarify the question. So is the question, how can external development help Brazil? Is that the question, or is it?
Yeah, we can take it that way. I mean, like Cassie said, we have passionate game companies, people that are very passionate about what they do, unique art styles.
Yeah.
But then again, maybe you've seen something that is missing, some type of pipeline or way people adhere to, documentation or something. It's a process.
Yeah.
How external development can help, and how can it ramp industry up or down?
Okay. So I worked for King a few years back. When I was there, I worked with Brazilian companies doing some 2D art. They're really great, and they deliver things in terms of quality. I think what I felt was missing is the project management side and the communication, the strong communication side. When I say communication, it's not about fluency of the language. It's just about when to communicate and when to ask questions, those kind of things. Which compared to other regions like China or India, I felt it was missing here. But in terms of the skill set, especially the 2D art, I was really impressed. We did a test across the globe. I think one of the studios here, I think they can only talk.
One thing I noticed in terms of just the culture of Brazil, it's very strong in terms of the stories that you guys have in terms of parts of your culture, but also in terms of you're malleable and have curiosity about others. And I think that's really important. I see a very similar when I go to Malaysia in terms of their exposure to Southeast Asia. I get the same vibe from here. And that's really quite a great skill to have because you don't get a lot of context with the games that you're working on. So you have to kind of really understand who your customers are and the markets that you're trying to appeal to. So I'm really encouraged in terms of what I saw or I've seen. In terms of what I think external development could do is help speed up that. I think in terms of your communication concern, that comes with experience, right? And I think as you guys get more and more partnerships with larger companies that can bring in revenue to help for training and have that kind of, that mutual symbiosis between, investments here and training, I think it's going to be a great future for you guys.
Yeah, I want to add to that having been a big festival for a few years and BGS and getting the sense of the type of projects and just the community in general, I echo a little bit of what Dave said in terms of it's a very vibrant, passionate gamer culture, and that's great because when the way I look at it is games are works of art at the end of the day, but also are software projects. And the craft of making games is just part of that. There's also the business of creating games. When it comes to external development, I think there's a huge opportunity to create kind of a new and pretty fun actually type of industry, because definitely that means new jobs or people that are thinking about getting into the game industry without necessarily creating a game or creating an IP. As David was saying, there's a huge opportunity as well to learn very quickly from big projects, big franchises, and apply that to either local IP or to a very ambitious project. Because when you look at how the technology is going and the trends in terms of cloud and streaming and different platforms, those are new things that were not in place just a few years ago. So external development brings that exposure and opens that opportunity for teams and companies in Brazil that are willing to have a business plan around it.
And okay, say that I want to start my own external development company. I want to provide services. What are the tips that you might give me, or what things you think are easily overlooked, or what are the common mistakes that people make once they're starting their companies?
I could start on this one. I think it's important to approach it kind of how a person who's an individual and they're trying to break into the industry, you know? Like if you're a character artist and you really are a fan of Blizzard games, and that's kind of like the art style that you're good at, and that's what you want to do, then you're going to target, studios that have that style that you can actually have a chance at impressing. And I think oftentimes a mistake I see when studios approach me to try to see if we can form a partnership is that they don't focus on the things that they're actually good at, or the studios that are actually, potentially wanting what they provide. Instead, they might like they're good at everything, or they're specialized at everything, and they kind of, once they misrepresent themselves, just kind of like, make their specialties and their, with what they offer like too broad, too quick. Some studios do a lot of things very well, but sometimes you need to mature as a studio and start branching out into other things. So when you're starting, my advice would be just to focus on what you're actually good at, and then to kind of know the developers who do what you're good at and focus on them, and then slowly kind of branch out and build into other skills and other disciplines, and then you can focus on other studios.
I would say, like you said, communication. Make sure you have strong project management, because you can have the best artists in the world, but if you can't create a clean pipeline between you and your partner, then it doesn't work. So make sure that you have a strong project management lead in place, and that you guys actually take the time to QA your work as well. Make sure that the specs are right, and just follow like the little details as well.
If you're looking to set up your own shop, I think like any other business, especially with creating a 3D loose design, it's very important to have a business plan in place and have a long-term plan. A lot of studios start thinking they can get some project quickly, in 6 months they can get a profit. At least what I've seen in a lot of studios, they can't make profit in 6 months, it takes some time. So you need to think about that, and you need to have a financial backup to sustain X number of time. So you need to calculate how much time you might need to really get profit, and what kind of team you need. And as you guys said, look at it. What is the best you can do? Whether it's character art, whether it's a prop, or whether it's doing just weapons. You can start off with that, specialize in that and pitch for the targeted studios, and then I think then make an impact, then business can take off. So for me, it's very important to get the basics right. That's including the business plan and having a long-term vision on where you want to be in 2 to 5 years.
You guys did so well. I'm not sure I can add much. I would say in terms of mistakes that I see a lot is I'll get someone with is in business development for a certain company. They'll reach out to me on LinkedIn, and then they'll basically say, "Hey, are you looking for external services?" And it's like, yes, I'm always looking for external services. It's like the worst question. It's just like, "Hey, do you breathe air?" It's the most ridiculous kind of question. So really understand who you're approaching and what the value that you bring, right? So have a portfolio ready to represent your studio, really understand where you are on the market, really be able to self-assess, right? Where your studio is, and relationships again don't happen overnight. I've had many successful relationships that I think could have been successful initially, but they don't line up right in terms of either the timing of the project on my side or just the type of work that they offer that I'm looking for right now. But it's an investment over a long period of time. So what I found success in terms of business development, people that I get along with, is they establish trust right away. And so trust in that is, again, being able to know exactly what they're good at and knowing and doing some research about who they're selling to so that they know our products, and so that I'm not, having to kind of like step back and say, you don't really know, what we do, right? So I've had times when people come to me and they don't know the game that I'm working on, which is kind of depressing.
I'll add to that. Definitely the sales business development approach is very unique in the industry, especially for the segment that we're focused on. And typically it takes many months or even years to build that trust that David is referring to. So only having someone with that experience is something that I will say a must-have, because that's an area that if you don't invest or don't have enough attention to, actually can close doors. And that means having a person that can go to different industry events, that can build those relationships without pushing too much into a sale. That's one of the key areas. The second one is, when you look at talent, I think it's also very important to try to bring talent to your company, to your studio. And talent meaning people that probably have been in large projects before, maybe abroad, maybe overseas, that can cross-pollinate within your team. Have that person spread those learnings across your team, not only on technical skills, but also in terms of the business of working as an external development company. That's very important. The third one will be make your portfolio very attractive but consistent with the segment you are targeting. So if you're trying just to do mobile games, make sure your portfolio reflects the needs of that market, of those developers, those publishers. If you're trying to work with console AAA companies, make sure your portfolio reflects that. It's not necessarily a look and feel. Come up with things that are relevant for the people looking at those projects or those assets.
Okay, so something that David said, that you said someone could push you from LinkedIn. So we're talking now about tips for starting a studio. And so once the studio is in place, how does one get noticed and not noticed in a bad way? Esteban kind of went into that a little bit. So, but yeah, how does a studio go about getting noticed the right way? And since you mentioned LinkedIn, does that also work? Does cold calling work? No.
So just to be clear, I'm sure these guys could probably attest to too. I think I probably am pinged if not once a day, every other day, constantly. So I think one big part of it is empathy for us, as in, if you were in our position and you see you're pinged every time with the same generic, hi, blank, my company is blank, we have very short time, right? We're trying to deal with production internally and trying to be courteous to people that are asking us questions online. A lot of times I don't respond because, there is no portfolio link. There's no value proposition in what they're saying. It's just a generic kind of mass thing to see if they'll get a ping. And then I've had times where I would reply, and then it's like they're trying to be my best friend on LinkedIn, and that's not what I need. But what I would suggest is, you can do that, but definitely know, the best thing to do is know when you're ready to expose yourself to a certain level of clientele, right? Go to don't go straight for something like Mass Effect or for Forza or whatever right away. It takes many years and a built-up pool of talent and experience in order to actually gain the trust and be able to handle that level of quality and at that level of professionalism in terms of what we need to do, right? So when I bring in a new studio, I'm putting my reputation on the line. That studio is putting their reputation on the line for the company we're working for, and for our external, for our audience, right? So for the gamers that are going to play this game. So it's a lot of people that we have to impress, right? So think about it from that way. Are you ready to do that? And if not, that's okay, but take those steps, right? So whether that's, doing mods or doing more indie, smaller titles, I've seen a lot of studios kind of do more smaller scale mobile things in order to kind of get their feet wet in terms of how production works, and getting the right staff, and then branching off, right? So that's only one way to do it. I've seen other studios that are into more of a film kind of 3D realm and have tried to kind of branch over to games to see if they can, cross-pollinate and grow their business that way. So there's many ways to do it, but don't shoot for the stars to begin with, because it's going to be a really tough climb.
Yeah, I want to add to that also the situation when you have an IP, where you're creating your own game, but at the same time you're thinking about offering services. I think that's an important thing to, I think Aaron was touching on the business plan. I think if you have clarity on where your priorities are, that's very important, because for us sometimes knowing that there's a team that may be developing a game and a team that may be offering development services, it's a difficult thing, because then I don't know which team I'm getting. So that's something to definitely pay attention to. There's no good or bad. Creating a game obviously is a good way to develop those skills internally, but you have to be very clear on how you position that. And it depends on the size of your studio and other factors. But definitely that's an area that I will definitely recommend to pay attention to. It's very different to just be in the business of being an indie developer, and it's very different to be in the business of external learning. You could potentially do both, but you have to be, you need more skills to do both successfully.
Can you remind me, is it you're already set up, and how do you get noticed, and does cold calling work? Does that summarize pretty much the question?
Yeah, pretty much. You're set up. So
Yeah.
how'd you get on your radar? How do you get Eric Marios to say, oh, I know who those guys are?
Cold calling, yeah, I think is often it does not work. But for me, honestly, it's not a definitive no, because sometimes it depends on the day that somebody cold calls me. I could be in a weird mood and say yes, and that's happened oftentimes. Maybe it's opened doors to a lunch and then a face-to-face, and then some potentiality or whatever. So it can work. It just doesn't often do that. I think that the bond that ties all these people together is XDS. It's pretty important to our community, and so this festival is important to your community. And a big way to get noticed is to embed yourself into that community. So most of the people that I've partnered with, all of the people that I've partnered with, I've met through this community, and like Dave alluded to in one of the early answers, none of those relationships are automatic. They often over the course of many, many meetings, the initial face-to-face becomes a coffee, and then it becomes a lunch, and then it becomes a dinner, and then it becomes drinks, and it becomes laughs. And it's like, I like these people. Their portfolio is solid. I'm comfortable with them, I get a good feeling, and that's how partnerships for me have always developed. It's through a comfortability that often happens over time because we're in the same community. So whatever that community is, for us it's often XDS, and to other extent like GDC and other conferences. But those ones are bigger, and so it's hard to kind of get to the point of why you're there. That particular conference very targeted to marrying people on the buyer side to people who are external service providers. So whatever that community is, it's important to, I think, like Esteban alluded to not that long ago, is to find the right representative for your company. And oftentimes they're unicorns, like finding the right biz dev guy isn't easy, because there's a lot of things that this person needs to have. They got to be a good salesman without trying too hard. They got to make you feel comfortable. They got to, evoke trust, and they have to know their product well, and they have to know your product well. And it's not often, I don't know a lot of really exceptional biz dev managers. So finding that person, having him embed himself in whatever community, helps marry those partnerships for your region, I think that's really important.
So, the code calling, for me it has worked, but it's taken a long time to get there. Basically, a lot of times I get invites on LinkedIn, or some people email me directly. We got a platform where I can invite them to register themselves and put all the details, their portfolio and everything, and once in a month we review with our team. And if someone's interesting, then we just tag them, and we might want to work with them if we have a requirement. So in one of the projects, we had a similar kind of requirements here, so I contacted them, then we did a test and we went through the process, and they got the project, and that worked well. In some cases it works, but as Eric said, I can use like XDS will speed up the process a little bit. And you can definitely form the relation faster, I think, and then just dropping the line in LinkedIn.
I mean, we all know cold calling is part of the industry. Like, it's not going to go away. But when you guys do it, make sure that you email with the one person that does the outsourcing or whatnot. If you email everybody in the company, letting them know about this, it's a guarantee I won't work with you, because then I get all those forwarded to me, and it's just not good. So do your research, find who actually does what you need your services for, and then also in your email, point out details about the company. Be like, oh, I played your Kim Kardashian game, and I loved her outfits on this level or whatnot. Find little details that show you actually did some research into our company, that you played our games, and you kind of know what we're looking for.
So basically, don't stick to the regular cold calling of sending a default email to 15 companies, but at least do research and do something different for each one. Okay, and once a company is in this relationship is okay, and you start working with them, what defines a successful relationship for you? How can things go well? And on the other hand, what defines a bad relationship? What can people do, or what should they not do in order not to close a door that had once been open?
That's a great question. It's probably on topic. That's its own panel. But I will say definitely communication is key, especially when you're working with companies in a different region, in a different country, with a different language, different culture. So definitely something to pay attention as a supplier, as a provider, but also the team has to have that readiness as well. So it's not only one-sided. Trust, we've been talking about trust, that's key, because it takes a lot of time to build that initial trust, but it takes even more when that trust is broken. And sometimes you don't get a second chance. So building trust is key, and that has many meanings, right? It can be at the company level, at the studio level, but I would say typically you can have a very talented company, a very talented studio that is not a good fit for a particular project. So I think that's also something important to be aware of. You can be very successful working with one studio within the same publisher or developer, but that doesn't mean that automatically you're going to be working with all the studios or with all the projects, because it's very specific to that. But the common thing is definitely long-term. Plan and prepare for long-term, because this is really about long-term relationships. We like to establish that trust and that communication and keep working that way, because the ramp-up it takes time and it's a lot of investment involved.
I would definitely say be honest. If I give you like a package and there is something in there that you may not be able to do, like the character style is not your strong point, just be honest. Be like, we can handle the props, but this character we don't feel like we can actually give 100% to, and I respect that way more than you actually attempting to giving a horrible character in return. So just be completely honest about what your strengths and weaknesses are, and that goes a long way.
The most successful relationships that I have are with studios that kind of make you feel like you're their most important client, even when you're not, or most definitely not there, giving them the most revenue or anything. You don't have the most artists on your team, but some studios they bring you in closely enough, and they help make it a really like a personal relationship, and those are the relationships that I kind of always happen to find, and it's not an easy thing, because obviously, you normally throw your most talented staff at the money makers, so it takes a lot of hiring of the right people kind of across the board, just to make sure that every client feels that they're important and their needs are being serviced, and they're not like on the fourth or fifth rung where they got the D team and the shitty PM and all that other stuff, So having a person, like other things that are important is kind of like trying to. My most successful partnerships are when I'm comfortable with the whole team, like from the CEO and the exec level all the way down to the most junior artist. They're comfortable with me and I'm comfortable with them, and it takes kind of investment from both studios. It takes an investment from the outsource manager to make that effort to connect with everybody on the team, and it takes some trust on the vendor side as well, because I know initially when that kind of philosophy started transitioning towards that, back in the day it used to be like this, you go on an on-site visit, you get to know the exec level, you get to know like the PMs, maybe the leads, but I didn't really know any of my artists on my team. And then when it started transitioning into me trying to have dinners with them and connect with them, get to know them because they were interested in that, sometimes vendors can be reluctant, like they want to make sure that their directors are there, so no junior artist says something embarrassing or, pisses the client off or something like that, so they want to be a buffer, but that buffer, it's going to ensure that the team isn't open. They're going to see their bosses there, and they're going to be like buttoned up, and then you end up talking to the bosses, and they're just, witnessing communication with the executive level, which doesn't add any benefit. So, the effort from the service provider with the effort from the outsource manager, so everybody kind of knows everybody, and your team. It really helps make for a successful engagement, I think.
You pretty much covered everything, but just like to add a couple of points. Once you got the project, and you might have gone through a test, and your artists or developers might have worked on the test piece. When it comes to production, don't switch the artists or the developers, because we will know that quickly, and that will kind of might backfire badly, and we might have you guys not being honest and not being transparent. So another thing is, if you want to switch the artist, that's fine. You need to let us know beforehand, saying that we want to switch, and there's another artist who has similar experience and he's going to get trained for a month or whatever it is, then move into the project. That's understandable, and we appreciate the kind of openness. I think the key is communication and being open and honest, and you don't have to be scared or anything like that. If you have issues, you can just discuss with your outsource managers or producers who it is. I think for me, something else. No, I think you guys covered everything.
Last thing I wanted to say, it's yours to lose. As in, once you're in, you've already gone through the vetting process, you've won enough trust to get in the door. I can't speak for mobile, but for AAA space and console, it takes a lot of effort in order to get, that working relationship in terms of all the tools. If there's firewall issues, security, there's a big process to get through the door even to start. So basically, it's yours to lose because whoever's brought you in is cheering for you. You guys obviously want to do the work, so it's yours to lose. And so what I mean by that is really treat it as something that you have to work towards in terms of trust, in terms of really clear communication, owning mistakes that you make, and really having solutions to move forward so that they'll come back again, right? So humans are lazy, right? It changes hard. So they want to use you again, right? So don't give them a reason not to.
I think Cassie mentioned something that's a no-no. It's maybe don't take on too much work. And Arun mentioned cheating out artists. Are there other things that any of you have experienced or can point out that are no-nos? You never do that because we're not again at you if you do. It doesn't even have to be when you're in a relationship that took a long while to start. It could be something that was maybe quicker. You had some immediate need, let's do this with them. But what is a no-no for sure for any type of relationship?
Maybe I'll share my recent experience. But this is not directly relevant to work, but still is very important. So one of the service providers we used to work with, we had a long-term relation. Their boss made a comment on social media, kind of a racist comment on social media, and there was a lot of reaction within our studio saying that we don't want to work with these guys anymore. So, as head of a studio, people have to be responsible in those kind of things and be careful. I think that's for us, that was kind of a big no-no, you can say. Again, what else? I don't think that's something.
Never give your client a virus.
And don't talk about the project on social media or to your friends. Most of us we don't want our projects out there quite yet, and so that's an automatic firing and possibly getting sued if you talk about the project.
Okay, we have a little bit of time left. I think we'll open up the floor for a few questions. And David has been very nice to bring us a few copies of Forza. So we'll be giving out copies to the first floor. Any questions or less questions? We'll figure something out.
Hi. Just for me to know how common if it happens to reach a student development to conceptual work, like character concepts or even level design concepts.
Oh, I mean, is there an opportunity to do that type of work? Is that what you're asking? Absolutely. Even So when I first started at BioWare, we were kind of building our teams from the ground up. So initially, I would say that it was difficult to do that work. But given where we were on the project, when Mass Effect Andromeda came out, or when we were starting to work in development, we had 3 games already that existed. So it was much easier for bringing external teams on because there was a good track record and library of stuff that the vocabulary was defined. So it was much easier to kind of bring an external team to help with that stuff. So Rael Lira, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. I'm not sure. He's Brazilian. He works up at a studio called Volta. Very excellent artist. Look him up. He's amazing. So I'm really happy that we were able to reach out to an external studio and get some new ideas. So it does happen. It doesn't happen. I would say that it's very often. You have to be really good, but there are some actually really good studios out there that are in that line of work for hire. Ready? Yeah.
Hi. I would like to ask, which type of service would you say is the most requested by the big companies? Like, is it coding? Is it art? Music?
I think at least it varies. Right now, at Jagex, we need a lot of engineering support, and after that, probably art, you can say. Then after that, right now it's QA and localization. That's the 4 main areas. There'll be other small things like creative services and this kind of stuff. But top 2 is engineering and art. So within art, there's a lot of things, game where there's character, there are props and everything. So it's end of the day, it's up to you what, as we said earlier, it's up to you what you're passionate about and know which area you want to pitch, make a pitch.
I think Cassie wants to go over.
I would just say on the mobile side, for us, it's mostly props and secondary NPC characters because our artists will focus on the main characters, but they don't have time to create the rest. So, and I've noticed with the trend of mobile, it's usually always props, NPC characters, and maybe like minor environments.
You talked about how small was the. What's the same question? Talk about how small were working with small projects instead of big ones, but how large or how small are the usual teams that you work with? How small can a studio start with looking for work with external development?
I think it really depends on the project. I'm sure Cassie probably works with much smaller agile teams where it depends. Whereas in the projects that I've been on, they're much bigger teams just because they're much larger scope of game. And it also depends on the cycle, right? And then what part are you joining? So I've had teams where it's gone down to 5 people. I have teams where it's gone up to 30, 35 people. And then like in total, in terms of external teams, I think at one point when me and Eric were working together, it was over 100 external people. It was pretty crazy.
I can give input in this as well. As a moderator, I can still. I've had projects that we worked on that we went down to 3, I think, because simply the partner wasn't in a hurry and they wanted to take things slow. So it also matched what he wanted in terms of a payment schedule. So the team was like 2-3 strong at the time, so it couldn't come down to that much.
Yeah, it's pretty different depending on the project and the service that you're offering. But one thing that we kind of pay attention to is, for us, there's a risk element also when we have a company that only has us as a customer, right? Because the other thing in the gaming industry, as probably you've seen or you've heard, is sometimes projects get canceled. So I think it's healthy not to rely on one project or one customer, because that's dangerous. So we also look at that from a risk perspective. So there's no magic number. It really depends on the game.
I would like to know what are the biggest differences between each company's pipelines when it comes to outsourcing, for example, art.
Okay, so I've worked with a few studios now. Each studio has their own pipeline. There's no one defined way. For a company where we work on live games, that means we release content every week. Our pipeline is completely different than a AAA game where it's a box game and you release to a certain date. That would be different. So there's no one certain way.
So I've worked on sports games, I've worked on RPGs, I've worked on racing games. I've worked on shooters. It really depends on, so from our perspective, level of investment when you look at per thing you're making, right? So, for example, if I'm working on FIFA, I have worked on FIFA. You're making a lot of jerseys and kits every year. You're making likenesses for players' faces, and you're doing it over and over and over again many times. So it's a different type of workflow, different type of skill of artist, much more specialized in doing volume, right? Whereas if we're working on Mass Effect, even if we're working on this is a sorry cup from the future, right? It's very different, right? In terms of trying to understand the story and lore behind something like this, and then trying to get artists to understand that, and then, okay, it's not making a cup again, you're gonna make sunglasses, Alliance sunglasses that's Commander Shepard's gonna wear. So it's very different in terms of skill set, in terms of training. So, and then, right now I'm working on cars, right? So realistic, you have very good reference, and again, it's more of a volume, but really difficult, intricate work, right? So a car for Forza takes about 6 months to make because they make everything, the interior, the exterior, and you have licensing and all this sort of stuff that's really important. So again, all these are art related, but very different in terms of process.
Unfortunately, we run out of time.
No, we ran out of time.
Okay, one last thing I wanted to say, XDS, we should probably advertise for that.
We should do that.
XDS is an external development conference, happens every year in Vancouver in the first week of September. I'm on the advisory board, Cassie's on the advisory board. So Arun's new to the advisory board. So if you guys are interested in terms of continuing in the community and getting your studio exposed, I would definitely recommend checking that out. So thank you guys very much. Thank you.
We are sold out on the vendor side for this year, so if you want to go, look into it next year. And when early roll tickets go on sale, buy. Because I think we sold out 2 weeks this year. So yeah.
But just 1 second. If we're going as a vendor, as a Brazilian vendor, you can always talk to Apoiar Games. So you don't have to buy directly through XDS. You can do it through Apoiar Games. They help out. So that's a more viable option in this case.
And I hate to say this because Chris will probably shoot me, but if you don't have a ticket to the conference, doesn't mean you can't go. As in, you can't. Everyone will be there. It's just you will be at the hotel next to XDS. So there is a way around it a little bit. And I'm not endorsing this. You never heard it from me. And if anyone says this to Chris, I'm dead. So just let you know.
Chris is watching.
Please delete that tape.
Just wanted to thank you.
Thank you very much.